Hi, I'm Gina. Today, I'm going to be walking you through the course Deep Dive, Creating Your First Ontology, available on learn.palantir.com. In this course, we're going to learn about what the ontology is, how to explore it, and finally, how to build your own. Before we get started, a quick word from our founder.
Discover how Palantir customers unlock more value from Foundry and AIP thanks to our live instructor-led trainings. We are Ontologize, a group of former Palantir engineers who love teaching. We've trained thousands of Palantir users at leading organizations around the world. Unlock the full potential of your Palantir deployment by going to ontologize.com.
You're going to begin from learn.palantir.com. Make sure you're logged in and head to courses. Now you're going to navigate to Deep Dive, Creating Your First Ontology, and click into it. And now we're going to begin. But first, make sure you're registered for the course. We'll start in the training overview. As a first part of this training, we're going to be working on understanding the ontology and the value of the ontology. Organizations don't tend to think about themselves in terms of the disparate data sets that make them up. They tend to think about themselves in terms of the entities and the relationships between those entities and the way that individuals within those organizations actually interact with the entities. And so in Foundry, data is organized into objects. So for example, an aircraft or a customer or a maintenance record, where each object is going to combine information from multiple, often disparate sources. And the ontology is where we define these object types and capture the relationships between them, as well as the way that we expect users to interact with those objects. Every organization's ontology is going to be totally unique to how they operate. Now, when we work within this structure, it makes the data easier to work with, creates a true shared vocabulary across teams, and helps build interconnected, interoperable workflows. In this course, you're going to explore an existing ontology, you're going to see how it's built, and you're going to learn how to start creating your own. So we're going to begin by installing a marketplace product. So let's hop into Foundry and go install this marketplace product. Now, before we go ahead and install this product, let's make sure we have a folder in our dedicated training project. So once you're in Foundry, you're going to navigate to Files. Now at this point, if you don't yet have a project to do your work, you're going to hit New Project. If you do have a project, you're going to navigate into that project, and you're going to make a new folder, and you're going to call this one Deep Dive, Creating Your First Ontology. And now we're going to navigate to Marketplace and install the product. So from here, you're going to hit Control-J and search for Marketplace. Now you're going to click on Marketplace. And now from Marketplace, you're going to go ahead and search for products. And you're going to search for Deep Dive. And you'll see that there are a couple products with that keyword in them. And we're going to choose Deep Dive, Creating Your First Ontology. Now you're going to click on it. And here we're going to hit Install again, or Install if it's the first time installing it. Now for the location, instead of generating a project just for this installation, we're going to use our own. And so here you're going to hit Use Existing Location. Make sure it's in your learning project. You're going to hit Browse. And then click into that folder that you just created. And now you're going to hit Save. And now we're going to hit Next. And you'll see here, there's a lot of different content that's coming with this marketplace product. So a couple of object view modules, which is going to support our object views, some object types, an action type, a couple of pipelines, and then many, many backing data sets, and a couple of more items. Now, before you hit Next, you're going to toggle on prefix ontology entities. That's to make sure that if your colleagues are using the same marketplace product, that you don't have naming collisions. So it's going to be Gina, and everything is going to be prefixed like so. And now you're going to hit Next, and then Install. And so here, we're going to hang tight while the installation completes. Once it completes, we're going to come back and start exploring the ontology. Now our installation is completed and we're ready to move on. So we've installed the Marketplace bundle, and now it's time to hop into Object Explorer to explore our ontology. But first, let's go through some context. In this scenario, we're imagining that we're a new employee at Fresh Air, which is a notional airline. And here, we're imagining that we've joined the flight operations department. So let's take a look at their ontology. So we have an airline, and the routes, and an aircraft, and a flight, and a flight alert, and an airport, and a runway. And so this models the relationships that we're going to expect in the airline industry. Now, note that these object types have an OFT prefix because these are also the names of objects that are commonly used in Foundry training. And so this is to avoid any collisions. And now let's hit next. So first thing is we're going to start with Object Explorer. And while there are many different ontology-aware applications in Foundry, Object Explorer is one of the oldest and also one of the simplest to use. It tends to be your default application for understanding and exploring your ontology and getting quick answers about your data. So let's go jump into Object Explorer. So first off, from wherever you are in Foundry, you can hit Control-J and search for Object Explorer. So you're going to click on Object Explorer. Now here we are in Object Explorer, and you'll notice that it looks a lot like a search engine. And so what you can do here is you can search for names of object types that you're familiar with and get your questions answered. Now, let's go start by trying to find a specific object, namely the Fresh Air Inc. object. Now, that object is going to be of the type OFT airline. And so instead of searching for the object, because you might have a lot going on in your stack, we personally have a lot of content here. Instead of looking for all object types, we're going to start with a specific object type. So for example, OFT airline. And now you're going to search for Fresh Air and hit search. And here in our search results, you'll see a number of airlines. And then at the very top, we have Fresh Air Inc. And so you're going to click on this one. Now here we are in the object view for Fresh Air Inc. Now, mind you, what this really is under the hood is a row of data. We're currently looking at an object, a single object, which is one instance of an object type. So the object type is an airline, whereas the instance of the airline object type would be Fresh Air Inc. Now, note that if you're not seeing this here, go check to make sure your marketplace product is fully installed, and then check back. For now, assuming you're here, you're going to see some high-level properties, a map that shows all the airports, the aircraft fleet by manufacturer and model, some of the linked objects. So of course, this airline is associated with some aircraft and some routes. And then here, we can see some detailed properties of this object, their aircraft fleet, and their routes. Now let's go through and try to answer some questions that are given to us in the Learn.Palantir course. So the first question is, what is Fresh Air's IATA code? So here, on the overview, we can see that their IATA code is FA. Now, next question is, what is Fresh Air's ICAO code? So you'll see it's not here. Let's go to Properties. In here, you'll see the ICAO is FRS. Now, next question, a little trickier. What does ICAO stand for? Well, you'll see that some of these properties have an underline. So if we hover over them, you'll see that this stands for International Civil Aviation Organization's 3-character code for this airline. Now, one more question here. Who is the single manufacturer for all of Fresh Air's aircraft? So if we look at their aircraft fleet, you'll see that even though they have a couple models, they're all manufactured by Bombardier Inc. Now, we've learned quite a bit just from looking at a single object. But now, let's traverse an object's links and start exploring object sets. So from here, we're going to switch to the Routes tab. And now we're going to hover over this list of routes. And you'll see that there's an option. You'll see a little globe with a magnifying glass. And we can hit Open in Explorer. And so here, we're going to stay in Object Explorer, but we're going to get a better view of all of their routes. So here, we're going to hit Open in Explorer. And now we are opening an object set. So an object set is like a query. An object set specifically is some number of instances of an object type. In this case, it is 320. But again, an object set is like a query, meaning it can be dynamic. So here, what we're looking at is an exploration. So an exploration is going to show you some high-level information about an object set. And so already, we can use this to answer some quick questions. And mind you, every chart here represents one property of the route object type. So origin, destination, directed route. Now, let's go ahead and try to answer some questions using these charts. But before we do, note that if you click a value in these charts, it will allow you to apply a filter. So now we are looking at a further subset of this object set. Now, if you did that and you want to undo it, you can always hit Undo Filter Change. Now, let's answer some questions in the Learn.Palantir course using this exploration. So question number 1. What are the top 3 origins for fresh air routes? So here we can see it's CLT, DCA, and PHL. Up next, we have our next question. How many routes originate from the Day Airport, DAY? And so here, I don't see DAY anywhere here. One option is I can hit Show More and Show More again, and I find it all the way down here, and there's 3. If you're working with much bigger data, you can always just search. And there we'd have our answer. So we're going to clear this. Now, next question. What percentage of fresh air's routes originate from CLT? So what we're going to do instead is we're going to change how this component looks. So one thing we can do is hit Show Percentages. And now we can see that 20% are originating from CLT. So the next question is, are there any fresh air routes that don't involve one of the top 3 airports as either an origin or a destination? And so here, what we're going to do is we can see that the top 3 airports are CLT, DCA, and PHL, both for origin and destination. So what we're going to do to answer this question is you're going to click on the top 3 origins here. And instead of Keep, we're going to hit Exclude and then Apply Filter. Now, same here, we're going to get rid of those under destination as well. 1, 2, 3, and then we hit Exclude and then Apply Filter. And now the answer is yes, there are routes that don't involve one of the top 3 airports as either an origin or a destination, but not that many, there are 2. And now we can go ahead and clear these filters. Now let's talk about traversing links a little bit more. When we're looking at an object set, we can always use the linked object section in the lower right to switch to all the linked objects that are associated with a specific object type. So when we're starting by looking at all of fresh air's routes, so all 320, in order to figure out how many origin airports are serviced by fresh air, we can click on the link here. So we can click on GINA, OFT, origin airport, and see that it has 84 different origin airports. So what we just did, we just traversed the link. You might also hear this referred to as pivoting. So we have 84 origin airports here. And now if we hit this little back button, undo pivot search, we're going to be back to our original 320 OFT routes. And here we can look at how many destination airports. And we can see indeed there are the same number, there are 84. Up next, there are some challenge puzzles for you to try out if you're looking for more practice. So now let's try to answer this first one. What is the highest elevation origin airport that fresh air services? Does it have a runway of at least 7,000 feet? Let's take a stab at this one. So let's go back here to answer that question, because we want to look at origin airports. So we're going to click on origin airports. Now the question is, what is the highest elevation origin airport that fresh air services? You can see this chart of altitude in feet, and we can see that there is one particularly high altitude airport. And so we hit Apply Filter for one selected range. Now we are looking at one airport, Asheville Regional. And now to answer the question, does it have a runway of at least 7,000 feet? Let's click on GINA OFT runway. So we're doing a search around. Here we can see that it has exactly one runway, and it does indeed have a length of 7,000 feet. In fact, we can verify that. It just has one value. A more appropriate chart here is a single stat, and we can see that it is 7,001. Now let's go back here, back to origin airports, and go back, and then clear this filter. Now the next question is, what is the fresh air origin airport that is located the farthest west? So here, we're going to hit Add Chart, And we're going to add a geohash property. And so if I click on geohash, and so here I can see all the airports. Now I can pretty much narrow this down to the furthest west one being at Oklahoma. So I'm going to narrow down into Oklahoma and see that the furthest west airport is going to be OKC Will Rogers World. So that's one way to answer this question. So the other way to answer this question is using longitude. So if I get rid of that and get rid of this filter and add chart, I can add a longitude chart and find the lowest longitude and hit apply filter for one selected range, and I'll see the same airport. So 2 different ways to answer this question. Now that we've answered the challenge questions, let's move on. You can read through these reflections as well. Now, let's talk about data lineage. Data lineage is an incredibly powerful tool to give you visibility into the provenance of your data and therefore your ontology. Now, oftentimes it's used by data engineers, but it's a valuable tool for everybody to become experienced with. So now we're going to start out from Object Explorer, and from Object Explorer, we're going to navigate to data lineage. So starting from Object Explorer, you're going to look at the Fresh Air Ink object. And so from here, to get to data lineage, you're going to go to More, Advanced, and you're going to hit Open Data Lineage. Now here we are in data lineage, and this is showing the entire provenance of the object and the data that backs the object, all the way down to the uploaded data sets. Now, of course, this object does not exist in isolation. This airline has relations to other objects, as we saw in Object Explorer. And so to add all of the related objects, there's a couple of different ways to do this. One is you can hit show to link types and then keep on expanding the links just to get all of the objects. Or you can do it through search. So if you click on Search Foundry and click on Object Types, look for your specific ontology, you'll see we have a lot of different objects in our ontology, of course. But if you search for OFT, then here you're going to see all of the OFT objects. So let's go ahead and add these. All of the green ones, not this gray one here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now we want to show all of the provenance for all of these objects, and then it will organize things. So you're going to hit Control A and hit Expand, and then hit that double back arrow, add 30 nodes. Now, this is a mess right now and we can't read it. So to make it better, you're going to once again select all the nodes, hit Layout, and you can make this level. And here we have a much better looking and much more readable graph. So now we're seeing our entire ontology and all of its provenance. Now we can use data lineage to answer some questions that are given to you in the course. So question number 1, are all these datasets located in the same project? Let's go through how to answer that. So right now, you'll see that this graph is being colored by resource overview. So is it an uploaded dataset? Is it a pipeline builder dataset? Is it an object type? So instead, we're going to color this by what project are these resources in. Note here that objects don't actually live in folders or projects. They inherit all of their permissions from their backing data. And you'll see here that all of these datasets are indeed in the same project, but that the object types are not in a project. Now, the next question is, were all of these datasets produced by logic or code found in the same repository? So here, instead, let's color by repository. So if we click on repository, you'll see that not at all, they were actually generated in a lot of different places. And so all of these colors are referring to different repositories. Now, let's try to answer the last 2 questions. So how many rows and columns make up the Ontology Airport dataset that backs the OFT airport object type? So let's go first identify that dataset. So here, we can see the OFT airport object type. And it is backed by one dataset, Ontology Airport. And here, if we click on Preview, you're going to see that this dataset has 18 columns and 4.3 thousand rows. Next question. Can you view the logic that was used to derive the Ontology Airports dataset? What application was used to define that logic? So if we look at this one, there's a couple of queues we have here. So the biggest queue is that if you look at this little thing right here, you can see that this is the pipeline builder icon and that this was generated in Pipeline Builder. Now, the other indication that we have here is that if you try to figure out what language this is or what programming language this is, you won't be able to recognize it. And that's because it's pseudocode. Remember, Pipeline Builder is a no-code pipelining tool. And so this is a pseudocode representation of the logic that took place in Pipeline Builder. So now we've concluded our portion on data lineage, and now we're going to move on to Ontology Manager. So back in the course, let's move on to the Ontology Manager section. So at this point, we've seen some of the structure of the ontology, we've demonstrated some of the value, and we've learned about the provenance of it. But now we're going to extend it. So whenever a flight is delayed or canceled or diverted, it might be useful to have an object to represent this happening. Now, once we have a flight alert object, that means that Fresh Air's Flight Operations Department can actually respond to it. And so here, we're going to build our own version of the flight alert object type. So now we're going to hit Next. And that is going to take us to Ontology Manager, which is where we build and maintain the organization's ontology. Let's go do it. So back in Foundry, you're going to hit Control-J and search for Ontology Manager. So here we are in Ontology Manager. Now note that while you can configure object types and links in Pipeline Builder, Ontology Manager is going to give you more capabilities. For example, defining links between object types that were not defined in the same pipeline, adding extra geospatial capabilities, and creating actions. Now note that some of you might not have permission to create new object types in the default ontology. So if you don't, you're going to want to check out the permissions and help lesson that's earlier in the tutorials. So one option is you can change your ontology to one that you do have permission to edit. Your other alternative here is to use ontology proposals, which means you develop on a branch. Those are two options for you in case you're stuck here. So first things first, we're going to create a flight alert. To do this, we're going to go to New, and we're going to click on Object Type. Now, you actually have two choices for when you're creating an object type. You have a choice to continue without a data source, and a choice to use an existing data source. So continuing without a data source is for cases where all of your records are going to be created by user edits. That's not the case for us. We're going to click on Use Existing Data Source, and you're going to hit Select Data Source, and here you're going to search for Flight Alerts. Now you're going to click on Flight Alerts, and you're going to hit Select. And now we're going to hit Next. Let's give it an icon. So for alert, an exclamation point could be nice. And we're going to call this, make sure to prefix it with your name to avoid any confusion, Flight Alert. Now you'll notice the plural name will update accordingly. Now we're going to hit Next. Now let's set the primary key and the title key. Recall that a primary key is something you must have when you're creating an object type. This primary key should be unique for every row, and it should be something that's not going to change. So for example, a person's email is technically unique for every person, but sometimes people change their emails, and that makes it not a good primary key. In this case, the primary key is going to be Flight Alert ID, and the title is going to be Alert Title. And now we're going to hit Next. And we're going to skip all this and then hit Create. And now we've created one object type. Now let's save our changes and go talk about a couple of fundamentals. So we're going to hit Save, and save to ontology, and then save changes. So back in the course, the Learn That Palantir course has a couple of interesting and very useful parallels here. So you can think of an object type as kind of a blueprint or a template. This is describing what attributes does, say, a customer have? What does a customer look like? What relationships does a customer have to other entities? Now, when you're thinking about an object type is going to be defined by a data set. If you're thinking about this from a relational database experience, you can think about an object type like a table. Now, up next, we have a row. And so a row would be a row of a data set or a row of a table would correspond to a single instance of an object. Up next, we have a column. So tables, data sets have columns, and those columns correspond to properties on an object. Now, most often, objects are going to inherit all of their properties from their backing datasets. But in certain circumstances, objects are going to have edit-only properties, which don't actually come from the backing dataset and will only be populated by user edits. Now, we set the primary key and we discussed some requirements for the primary key. Again, it must be unique for every row or every object, and it must be something that's not going to change. You're not going to want to make a primary key that, for example, uses a row number to make it unique, because that is something that could change. So generally, it's important to make sure that your primary key is going to be unchanging for the same objects. Now, actions is something that we're going to build, but that we haven't done yet. So actions give us a controlled way to create, edit, or delete objects. In any sort of organization, there are always processes and operations, and actions give us a way to codify those operations into user edits that modify our ontology. In this specific case, our flight alerts are only coming through the pipeline, but we will be creating an edit action to resolve alerts, but not a delete alerts action. Now, if you hop back over to Foundry, you'll notice that there's a little bit of spinning happening here. And under data sources, you'll see that there is some action happening in the live pipeline. So what's happening now is Foundry is indexing your data to the ontology backend, known as Object Storage v2. Now, sometimes this process can fail. Let's talk about some reasons why this process would fail. This could fail if your primary key is not primary. If you have duplicate values, that's going to cause the sync to fail. If the columns in your backing data do not match the property types in your object, that can also cause the sync to fail. If a column gets deleted that a property was backed by, that can also cause a sync to fail. Now, note that we don't need to wait for this process to finish before we move on. Now, the next thing that we're going to do here is build a link type. A flight alert does not exist in isolation. We want to be able to associate flight alerts with flights. The point of creating links, rather than just tacking on all of the flight information to the flight alert, is there's a lot of information on the flight object that we don't need to repeat for every alert. However, people who are responding to the alert should be able to easily find that information, and we're going to do that by creating a link. So from here, we're going to go to New and click on Link Type. Now, this is going to be an object type foreign key relation. So there are 3 types of relations in Foundry: object type foreign keys, join table, and backing object type. Let's focus on these first 2. So object type foreign keys are for one-to-one or one-to-many relations. So for example, every flight might have multiple alerts, but every flight alert is only associated with one flight. Now, in join table dataset, that is for many-to-many link types. So now we're going to hit Next. And on the many side, we're going to have your name, flight alert. So you're going to click on flight alert. Now, this is going to be a foreign key at primary key relationship. So before we set the foreign key, the other object would be Gina, OFT, flight. So that's going to be down here. So I'm going to click on that. You'll see here that the primary key of flight is, of course, flight ID, and that must match the foreign key on flight alert, which was automatically configured to be flight ID. And that's correct. So now we're going to hit Next. Link types have API names because they can be referenced in code. And now we're going to hit Submit. You should have a link type that looks like this. And now that you've created your link type, you're going to go ahead and save your changes. Now, when thinking about the cardinalities of these relationships, given that there are 3 different cardinalities of joins, one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many, understanding what relationship is going to be appropriate for your entities is going to depend on you having a deep understanding of your data and how the entities in your organization relate together. So there's never going to be one straight answer for what cardinality of relationship you should have. Now let's move on to actions. If objects and links are the nouns of your ontology, then actions are the verbs. Actions create ways for users to actually interact with your ontology. Actions are designed to capture operational processes that exist within an organization. So for example, in the airline space, we're going to have individuals responding to flight alerts. And so by building them an action to do it, we're creating a controlled and an auditable way for them to do this. Before we do that, we have to explicitly allow edits to the object type. So to do that, you're going to go back to Flight Alert. You're going to go to Data Sources, and you're going to click on Allow Edits. And now you can go to New, Action Type. Now, we have many choices here. So action types can modify objects, they can create links, they can run functions, they can hit webhooks, they can alter interfaces, or send a notification. And so the object type here is going to be your name, Flight Alert. Now you're going to click on Flight Alert. And instead of create, because all of our alerts are going to be created in the pipeline, we're going to hit modify. And now you're going to hit next. Now the question is, what properties do we want the user to be able to modify? Probably not all of them. So in this case, the only property we want to modify is root cause. And now we're going to hit next. Now here, let's give this a better name. So let's call this Gina. Assign root cause. And now we're going to hit next. Now, as you can imagine, not every person should be able to execute every single action. In this case, the default is that your entire organization can, and that's fine. So now we're going to hit create. And here you have your brand new action. Now let's talk about what's going on here. In the overview, you're going to see your high-level overview of what your action does. Under the rules, we're going to see a detailed breakdown of what this action type is doing. In this case, it's modifying a flight alert, specifically only one property. Now, note that we can chain rules together, so I could chain this with other simple actions, or say a notification, or even a webhook. I can also add multiple properties here, but for now, we're sticking with just root cause. Now, when it says map to, what that means is we're modifying one property of flight alert. How are we populating it? Are we populating it with a static value? Are we populating it by just grabbing the current user's ID? Is it going to be a random unique identifier? In this case, we're mapping it to a parameter, which means it's going to be a field that the user fills out on a form. So if we click on parameters, this is where we design the form for the user to interact with. If you see this in your form, don't worry about it. Your form is still configured fine. And so now we're going to go hit save and save to Ontology and save changes. And so now you've built one object, one link type, and an action. Let's go take it for a spin. So from here, you're going to hit Control-J and search for Object Explorer. Now you're going to click on Object Explorer, and you're going to search for your flight alert object. Now it might show up here, but if it doesn't, you can search for it in the search bar. Now you're going to click on it. And here we are, the same exploration that we saw before. So now if we click on a single flight alert object, here we are looking at one instance of the flight alert object type. And then here, you should see an option to apply actions. If you don't see this, go double check that you've actually saved your ontology. So here, we're going to click on actions and hit assign root cause. So that is the action that you've just configured. So we're going to click on assign root cause. And here, we're going to enter some sort of simple root cause. So for example, waiting for gate assignment upon arrival. And now we're going to hit submit. And what you'll see is that that is immediately reflected in the ontology. So now the root cause says waiting for gate assignment upon arrival. And now at this point, we've finished the building. So let's do a little reflection on what we've done and what else could be possible. So we made a simple action in the grand scheme of things. But let's talk about what other sort of actions we could configure. For example, we could assign an incoming flight alert to a given operations operator. And not only that, but we could do it cleverly, say, using AI. We could forward the alert to the local flight maintenance team for processing. We could reassign the flight crew, queue for passenger rebooking, and many more. Moral of the story, for all the different operational processes that happen within an organization, you can capture them using actions on objects. And so this starts to motivate that what we're really doing is building a dynamic digital twin of our organization. Now, we're going into the conclusion. So in summary, we covered what makes the ontology so valuable. Now, in addition to the initial points that we covered in why ontology is valuable, let's talk about ontology and AI. One of the biggest benefits of ontology with AI is being able to provide clean and usable inputs to AI. If your data is messy enough that a human can't answer a question, your AI is also going to really struggle with it. If you don't have unified data and well-understood data definitions, humans will also really struggle to answer a question like, how many flights last year were delayed? However, when you have these unified data definitions and mapping of data to objects, it makes it much easier for humans to answer questions and also much easier for AI to answer those same questions. And then up next, the ontology gives us a destination for AI outputs. And so that enables us to integrate recommendations or suggestions or remediation ideas directly into those object types, which enables us to better capture the utility of AI. Now, in addition, we covered several tools. We covered Object Explorer, Data Lineage, and Ontology Manager. Now that you've covered ontology, for your next steps, you can take a look at object views, or Quiver, Workshop, or even the OSDK. And that concludes this course. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this helpful. Let us know what ontology questions you have in the comments.